What's going on, everyone? Today is May 5th, or 5/5 of 25. Of course, 25 is 5 times 5. Welcome back. My name is Derek, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the numerology that has been encoded into today's news story about Donald Trump ordering federal officials to reopen Alcatraz in the San Francisco Bay, so that this island can once again house the most dangerous criminals in the nation. So, of course, in this video, we're going to talk about the language of Gematria and how many of the numbers in Gematria connect to the date of this news story. Although it wasn't really in main headlines until today, it was published yesterday, May 4th. So this is the date that we'll be paying attention to in regards to this story. United States Penitentiary Alcatraz Island is the official name of this facility, which is on an island that has now been added to the National Register of Historic Places. Back in 1996, a Hollywood film about Alcatraz called The Rock was released. And this is a film I actually saw in theaters, not to age myself too much here. It's a pretty interesting action flick, and it was directed by Michael Bay. So in this video, we'll explain how the movie The Rock and its director are connected to this story through the Pi Code, which also harkens back to Skull and Bones. Now, speaking of The Rock, pro wrestler Dwayne Johnson, famously known as The Rock, just celebrated his birthday on May 2nd, 2 days ago, 2 days before the story. And notice how he is 53 years old. Just turned 53. And in Gematria, Alcatraz equals 53. And when the prison first opened, it even happened on a date with 53 numerology. The Rock was first signed to WWE in the year 1996, which just so happens to be the same year that The Rock was released to theaters here in the United States. Now, with Alcatraz being in San Francisco, that's a city that gets its name from Saint Francis of Assisi. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Pope, the Bishop of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, passed away. And he too acquired his name from Pope Francis of Assisi. In fact, if you measure from the date Alcatraz Penitentiary first opened, August 11th of 1934, to the day the Pope was born, you get 122 weeks. This brings us to the language of Gematria, where we kick things off in the alphabetical order, where each letter is assigned a number 1 through 26, and using this cipher, the city of San Francisco equals 122. Pope Francis also has the 122 in that same cipher. And San Francisco, and thus Alcatraz, is even located on the 122nd western meridian. So there's more with the Pope to unpack. But before I get there, I want to talk about this significant connection with the opening date of Alcatraz and the moon. Now, on August 10th, just 1 day before the opening of Alcatraz, there was an annular eclipse, which is an event that happens less than once per year. That eclipse belonged to Saros series 144. And as you'll see on the screen, that also matches the Brown lunation number. Now, I've been using this particular calculator for about 3 years almost, and I've never seen this before, where the Saros number matches the lunation. This number 144 is special to the Pope. This was the first Pope to be a Jesuit, meaning he was a member of the Jesuit order. And notice how in the alphabetic order, Jesuit order equals 144. In the standard reduction, or Pythagorean form of Gematria, where every double-digit number becomes a single digit, also notice how Jesuit order equals 54. This matches the date of the news story, May 4th or 5-4, which this year also had primary numerology of 54, 5 plus 4 plus 20 plus 25. Now, this number 144, again, Alcatraz opened one day before an eclipse from Saros 144 during lunation 144. Well, 144 is a pretty special number when it comes to the study of numerology. This is because not only is 144 the 12th Fibonacci number, but it's also 12 times 12. So you could say that the number 144 is directly linked to 1212. Yesterday's news fell 1,212 lunar orbits after the date Alcatraz first opened. A lunar orbit, also called a synodic month. This is a little over 27 days. In the Sumerian method of Gematria, where we take the alphabetic order and simply multiply it by 6, not only does the city of San Francisco equal 1212, but so does Skull and Bones, and we will see how they are linked in a minute. Remember, the number 144 is very special to the book of Revelation in the Bible. And Pope Francis's death was heavily synced to the numerology of Revelation. You can find more details in my recent video on the numerology of Pope Francis. Also, you'll notice that Alcatraz sums to 134 in the reverse alphabetic order. That's the standard ordinal value of solar eclipse 134, so it doesn't seem like a coincidence that it opened just a day after a significant solar eclipse. In fact, the Jesuits also sums to 134, just like Alcatraz. So this phrase that we looked at earlier, Jesuit order, which connects very well to the date for Alcatraz news. Well, in a special cipher called Latin Gematria, all right, sorry about that cutaway, everybody. I had a brief OBS crash, but I believe the stream should be up and running once again. So the next part I was getting to was this Skull and Bones code, which has been a real focus of my channel over the past couple years and is rearing its head again. The 223 in Jesuit order syncs up with Skull and Crossbones, which equals 223 ordinal, and 322 in the Kabbalah. Remember the 322, the digits on their emblem. Well, when Alcatraz first opened, back in 1934, digits very similar to Alcatraz, right? 134. Well, August 11th, the date of its opening, was the 223rd day of the year. And if you measure from that day to March 21st, the date it closed, well, March 21st is 223 days after the 223rd day of the year. This news falls 322 days before the closing date of Alcatraz, which was just one day before March 22nd, or 322. The director of the movie The Rock also has a connection like this because he was born 22 months and 3 weeks after the closing of Alcatraz. Now, a huge number to the Skull and Bone Society is 76. Secret Society shares this value with Skull and Bones. Alcatraz in San Francisco, a city which also equals 76. With prime numbers, pi equals 76, and you will see how pi is synced very soon. Well, when the movie The Rock first came out, back in 1996, it was on the date the 7th of June, or 7/6. In Latin Gematria, which I believe is still the most significant method, Alcatraz equals 706. And the movie's director, Michael Bay, Michael also equals 76. Yesterday's news fell 76 days after Michael Bay's birthday. And just as an aside, down in the description below, I have another video that I made about Michael Bay a few years ago. I actually knew a kid growing up named Michael Bay who died in a plane crash, and there were some very startling synchronicities to the director. But back to the topic at hand. I pointed out how Alcatraz has the 706. But another huge number in this story is the number 82, which is the ordinal value of this famous penitentiary. Measuring from the date of yesterday's news, May 4th, to the date of the 2027 total solar eclipse, which is on August 2nd, or 8/2, is 820 days. Now, you may notice that this eclipse in 2027, this belongs to a very special Saros series. Saros 136. The reason this is connected to the Jesuits is because the Jesuit order was founded in September of 1540, just 3 days before an annular eclipse from this series. This Saros series began in the year 1360. And here in America, the date was still 13/6. In the alphabetic order, the Jesuits equals 136. And look at how long the movie The Rock ran for. This movie was 136 minutes long. Don't forget, 13 is the 6th prime number. I believe it's the Jesuit order, which is also 1336. So that eclipse is relevant, and it's the one I talked about in regards to the Kentucky Derby as well. But there's another strong connection with the number 82 here. Consider how in leap years, the 82nd day of the year is March 22nd, or the date written 322. Well, Yale University, home to Order 322, turned 322 years old in 2023, which is clearly not coincidental. And if you measure from this date, October 9th of that year, to the date of this news story, it was exactly 82 weeks after Yale turned 322 years old. But that's not all. Yesterday was also 82 days before San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge turned 32,200 days old. the Golden Gate Bridge, which is essentially in, most of the same camera shots as Alcatraz Island, opening on May 27th of 1937. Yesterday was 82 days before the 322. Now today, the day after the news article, check out how old the Pope would be today. 32,282 days of age. Incredible. But this measurement also has one more intriguing alignment. Because on the date of the news, the Pope was also 1,060 months and 18 days of age. Well, that's pretty fascinating because the golden ratio begins with the digits 1618. The golden ratio. And here we're talking about the Golden Gate Bridge. In fact, if you measure from the birth of Pope Francis to that same opening date of the Golden Gate Bridge, you get 161 days. The first 3 digits of the golden ratio. Another connection with the Pope here is that he died on the date 421, which is how you would write April 21st. And 421 is the 82nd prime number. And this is clearly all about the number 82. And the number 82 is very relevant to total solar eclipses, as we've seen over the past several years. Remember, I've been calling these the skull and crossbones eclipses. And the reason is very simple. Because these 2 eclipses over the United States were exactly 82 lunar phases apart from one another. Well, if you instead measure from the first eclipse to Yale's 322nd anniversary, you find it's exactly 82 sidereal months apart, which is the other measurement of the moon. And I believe a significant reason that the number 82 is so important is because it's the first number with Gematria of 666 in any of the common methods that are used in Gematria. Now, this might seem like a stretch, but I did think it was interesting that this official penitentiary name, if you take the entire name of the Alcatraz Penitentiary, it sums to 572. And in Latin Gematria, that's Skull and Bones 572. This news came out 573 days after Yale's anniversary, so it doesn't match exactly. However, the news was also 41 days before Donald Trump's birthday, and that's Skull and Bones in reduction. So next up, we're going to talk about pi, the mathematics of the circle. And the reason is very simple. Of course, the word circle has gematria of 223 and 322 in reverse. And when we talk about Yale and its special anniversary, it really all harkens back to the circle. When you spell out the number 223, this is the first number with ordinal gematria of 314. Same thing with the number 322. 314. 22 divided by 7, the smallest equation on a calculator. It's also the gematria of this phrase. Now, the director of The Rock is Michael Bay. And look how old Michael Bay was for this news story on Sunday. 3,141 weeks and 5 days old. My friends, that's the first 5 digits of pi. 31415. In fact, this story was also 3 months and 14 days after Donald Trump took office. And if you instead measure from the opening date of Alcatraz, it's 33,140. When Alcatraz closed a day before 322, that date had numerology of 106, which is the reduction gematria of 322, 223. Yale and Pi both have the 16 in gematria as well. When The Rock hit theaters in 1996, it was almost exactly 444 lunar orbits after the closure of the penitentiary. And this is a big skull and crossbones number. We talk about it often. If you look at the movie's producer, Jerry Bruckheimer, he had the 8/11 in his age yesterday, and 8/11 is the date that Alcatraz opened. Now, I do have a few more notes I want to throw out there before I wrap this video up. If you exclude the word "and," 223 and 322 both equal 295. So we saw the 106, but what about this 295? Skull and Bones Society, also 295. Skull and Bones with capital letters, 295. Well, in the same year that The Rock came out, and the same year that the pro wrestler The Rock debuted in WWE, Yale University turned 295 years old. And The Rock came out 124 days before that date. Donald Trump had the 124 in his age for The Rock's closure. And yesterday's news was on the 124th day of the year. It's also the date leaving 241 days, which is the 53rd prime number. Mentioned that number at the top of the video with Alcatraz, its opening numerology, and The Rock turning 53 just 2 days before this news story. There's also an interesting link with the number 142. And maybe this comes from the fact that federal prison equals 142 in the alphabetic order. When this federal prison first opened, it was on the date leaving 142 days in the year. Donald Trump, born 142 weeks after Jerry Bruckheimer. He was also born 142 months after the federal prison opened. 142 is also the gematria of the number 42, and Trump was a span of 42 days before his birthday yesterday. Federal prison also equals 450. Trump was formerly the 45th president. The digits 450 found in the age of Alcatraz when it shut down. And then we get this news story on the 4th of May, or 4/5, linking back to federal prison 450. So a little bit of a deep dive there at the end. But again, solar eclipses, the Jesuit emblem, containing a sun with the 32 rays, essentially resembling an eclipsed sun. So yeah, if you want to learn more about this huge sync with the solar Saros 136, there is a video I made that discussed this specifically. And it was when Donald Trump was on the Logan Paul podcast. This episode was uploaded on June 13th, the anniversary of the start of this Saros series. In the Eastern Hemisphere, this was on June 14th, which was Trump's birthday. So this is all linked together. I'll go ahead and link this video below down in the description after I'm done. But for now, that'll do it. So thanks to everybody for tuning in, whether you're watching live or archived. Please do feel free to help the creator, like, share, subscribe, etc. Peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to y'all next time. See ya.